I'm going to introduce the next block, where we are going to, like an onion, peel off the different layers of the aspirations that Honorable Charumbira spoke to, and really the cry, I would say, for support for further reflection that we heard from Dr. Tedros in response to the statement that we issued, and then the set of very concrete measures that Dr. Franzen has set out here. And in this block, we will hear from the science. I heard, Dr. Franzen, that you were making a plea that rather from the short-term projects on science, we really need to move towards a long-term engagements, to clusters of excellence that can really assist in preparedness, emergency preparedness in all of the different challenges that we are facing. And I hope that in this next block, we will hear today some vision for that. We are going to open, and I'm going to introduce to you in a moment, esteemed Professor Dr. Mouhamad Mpezamihigo, the Vice-Chancellor of Kampala International University of Uganda, who will speak to the relevance and the importance of education. We'll then hear from Professor Francesca Oladipo from the University of Lokoja in Nigeria, who will speak to this issue that you set out, Lieve, on the really very critical issue of data, digitalization, the internet, and where we go from where we are at present on that. Then we hear from Dr. Reginald Nalugala from Tangaza University College in Kenya on how efforts of social transformation and peace building need to tie in with these educational and scientific efforts of the academic institutions. And then we will round off this block by Professor Ronald de Jong, who's really an expert and distinguished expert on sustainable leadership in global responsibility. And then from there we go to the final block, where we really are going to turn to the meaning of all this for the level of the practitioner, the execution. So it's my task now to introduce to you Professor Mpezamihigo from Kampala International University in Uganda. And Professor Mpezamihigo chairs a number of important initiatives. One is that he is the chairman of the implementation network on findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data, which is something that actually, as we entered into the pandemic, became a critical requirement by the European Union on all science that is supported by the European Union at this point needs to be curated with the principles of fair data science. And so the big question in 2019, as we prepared as European Union for this fair science, was what does this mean for Africa? And Vice-Chancellor took the initiative to chair the implementation network, fair implementation in Africa. And then Professor Mpezamihigo is also the chairman of the project of DISH, which looks at using of digital technologies for reaching vulnerable students on the African continent. And then finally, Professor Mpezamihigo will talk to the important question of how do we link excellence as academic institutions with the incredible demand and large numbers of vulnerable communities that also need to be served by the level of excellence that we as academic institutions also need to establish. It's an honor, VC, to introduce you today and to give you the floor. We look forward to hearing from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Miriam, and what a pleasure it is to address this conference in the presence of the Honorable Acting President, Fortune, Chief Fortune Charumbira. So glad. I also want to register my humble appreciation to Dr. Francien, who has really laid a concrete foundation for the topic I'll be sharing this afternoon. So Clara, if you can, please do share the slides so that we are able to learn from one another. As Professor Miriam, I want to thank you so much for your efforts and indeed for giving us the opportunity. And together we've been able to demonstrate that we can actually work together towards what I now term the concept of reverse linkage. Yes, Clara? Thank you so much. Now, I want to demonstrate from what Francine has just talked about, and I was so happy she categorized the key areas in which we can actually together work and be able to deliver communities out of the dire need for vaccines, improve their health, increase access in collaboration between Africa and Europe. And this power of reverse linkage is really catalyzed by the whole era in which we are, the digital era. Maybe for some of our listeners, the term reverse linkage is relatively new, but the IMF looks at reverse linkage as a collaboration between developing and developed or industrialized nations. And the IMF, International Monetary Fund, postulates that the reverse linkage should be looking at the benefits, the growing importance of developing countries actually to the developed countries. This is quite an interesting phenomenon. Definition falls in the partners or collaborators who work together, and those who bring together resources, we put resources together. The concept has been in practice for a long time. I know that we are endowed differently. Africa is endowed differently from Europe. However, pulling resources together under this concept of reverse linkage, I think is going to take us to a certain point. The analogy brought out by Dr. Francien was a good one, because we have to use data as our basis. And so I want to suggest as a way forward for us to actually build and also popularize this Africa-European summit that is taking place, for us to look at the framework that can help in bringing out the richness of a reverse linkage approach. Number one, there's need for us to actually have technical cooperation, knowledge exchange, expertise, sharing, and resources redistribution. We have by mandate to foster collaboration between countries and institutions, and I think our demonstration between the African and the European partners in some of the projects we are undertaking is a demonstration to the fact that at institutional level, we can actually broaden the benefits to the country level. And then thirdly, there are quite a number of opportunities of sharing experiences. I'll tell you that in 2019, we visited the Netherlands, and little did we know that as a humanity, we are going to be confronted by a huge pandemic, COVID-19. And in fact, we were planning collaborations and trying to exchange experiences and information and how the concept of fair data or verification would actually take root in Africa. And here we are in one of the projects. One of the speakers, Professor Oladipo Francisca, will be able to share in this conference some of the amazing benefits of such an exchange of experiences, and also trying to discuss different appropriate technologies. There's one particular issue that has been raised by the chief and also Francen, and this is the issue of sharing and enhancing managerial and technical and institutional capacity. I'm sure Professor Ronald Bijong will be able to give models and examples of how this works. And so reverse linkages really puts everybody on the same footing, but bring different resources at different levels. So this is something that I think the framework for Africa-Europe cooperation can take into consideration. We have to map our needs and our capacities in order for us to forge a way on how to tackle some of the key issues of poverty, issues of inequity and access, and also disease, and also issues of communication, because Africa lags behind largely because for two reasons are related to our communication challenges. Next, please. Thank you. When you look at the concept of reverse linkages, I would like to propose something into the framework that may come out of this summit, of this conference. We need to do what I have called a strategic alignment so that we harmonize the needs and priorities. I know European governments may have different agendas, but in Africa, we also have different needs and priorities. By strategic alignment, I think Africa-Europe collaboration framework should be able to set off as quickly as possible, not 2 years after we've been hit globally by the pandemic. There's what I call a second pillar, which is inclusiveness, where by inclusiveness is that we accept as partners that each one of us can contribute, and it's not, we are not talking about equality, we are talking about equity in offering. So Africa may offer the brains, they may offer the resources, they may offer the time. The EU partners may come on board with additional resources so that together on the table we have contributed, if you wish, to this Africa-Europe buffet where we can make choices and people can actually enjoy and work together for the benefit of the two populations. Now, the win-win is whereby we come with a spirit. In the reverse linkage, we should come with a spirit of not the upper hand giving the lower hand. No, it's expected that there are benefits. For example, the projects that we are undertaking jointly with the European partners, whereas there's huge facilitation that is coming from our partners, there is a huge benefit that is going to have a multiplier effect. It may also influence policy. We are increasingly being invited to share these experiences as learning points. And I think the win-win as a pillar in a reverse linkage approach is something that we all have to embrace in order for us to move ahead. And peer-to-peer management means that we are committed. We have to get commitments to whatever joint projects we undertake for long-term engagements. This is not a short-term relationship. This is a pillar, a very strong pillar of reverse linkages, because out of a small project are born many projects. I can demonstrate that, for example, we were so gratified by the Philips Foundation that offered seed funding to start, in a very humble way to pilot, what would now result into a huge Modern Africa project, which has brought on board other partners. We are also rolling out in different aspects. So the other partners come on board. So the engagement starts in a very humble way, but peer-to-peer, meaning that when we call upon you as a partner in the reverse linkage approach, then we are able to move. Ownership and commitment, we together have to own the joint projects and also prepare a succession plan so that we build further capacity. I was so happy that the gaps that have been identified of health workers. In Africa, we struggle. I mean, on one hand, there's heavy regulation, which is a good thing to maintain quality production of health workers. On the other, you have burden of running institutions because of issues like underfunding and others. And yet, our European partners could actually be able to do a reverse linkage support that would help build this capacity, be it in the production of vaccines, be it in enhancing research, mention it, so that it is a two-way game rather than just a one-way. Last but not least is the concept that comes out of the reverse linkage. And this is really best fit rather than impose a fit-for-all solution. Historically, what has been happening is that you have the big brother, the big funder, who comes on board with an agenda that, please, are you willing to deliver this particular program? Here is the money, and here are the terms and conditions. In the reverse linkage is that we try to come out with a solution that is jointly discussed and reached upon, and then resources are equitably shared, and all of you take responsibility out of this. So these pillars fit in very well, because I hope this can go into a framework that can help us to build further, even when we identify partners who want to participate in our reverse linkage approach, then we know that these are the guiding pillars and principles. Now, as I come towards the end of my highlights, we know, and indeed there is data to support it, that Africa over time has built capacity, especially in human resources. However, of course, we know that there has been a brain drain over the years. Many of our experts, this morning I was just discussing with a journalist from Europe, and I said you may find that even some of the renowned scientists in the labs in the West and in Europe and in the US are probably of African descent. Now that is quite interesting, because if we are to have this move that will help Africa come out of this sort of dark time, lagness, staying backward in terms of the speed at which we are able to respond to catastrophes, to disasters, to epidemics and pandemics. I mean, this is something that we need to think about. So the human resource has been built over time. The second observation is where we find North-South support has somehow dwindled. It's being redefined due to the geopolitical reasons and economies, and also countries that have been supporting a one-way North-South support have actually got into other issues that have affected their funding models. However, we also know that within Africa, or the South-South cooperation, it is very, very possible for us to actually harness, benefit from existing capacities. However, we still need to bring on board other nations from the European partners who can actually assist this synergy. I mean, for example, the project I'm about to discuss to you with is the project in which we have close to 9 countries of Africa being supported by a Dutch partner in delivering, education through distance learning and online. This project is actually run by the Africans themselves. Those countries are partners, they are participating. However, the third partner, who you call the European partner, coming on board, made everybody realize the sitting potential. Because, I mean, everything that is happening, and now I can talk about the dish success. We initiated a project, and this project was meant and designed to assist people, especially during this pandemic period where movement was a problem, and actually migratory communities, places of war, the women and the youth, we know, are usually the first victims. They are the frontline victims. And so this is helping Africa to redefine its own destiny through collaboration. Potential exists, you know, we are increasingly getting digitalized in Africa. And for this reason, I would like to propose that we should be thinking, as we have this summit taking place in Brussels, we should be trying to look at best examples from which we can pick. So the DISH stands for Digital Innovation and Skills Hub. This was established by Africans, and again, the concept of the reverse linkage through the European partners really made this very, very possible. With funding from NOFIC, we are able to develop support and also have sustainable programs that can be run well beyond the end of the project. And this is something that I think we are applying digital science for health and education, and being able to demonstrate that it is possible indeed with resources coming together, both financial, material, and the space. This space that we are talking about is a great resource that we can actually monopolize. We can work together with the European partners and bring other partners on board to be able to work together for the good of humanity. Now, I would like to suggest that there is need for us to have what I'm calling digital cooperation. There is no way we shall run away from the aspects of digitalization between Africa and Europe. And what is happening, there are lots of disparities, there are lots of differences, there are lots of issues of a policy nature, of access nature. You know, even when we were implementing this DISH project where we are availing online material, we still encountered challenges within the context of the countries where we are operating. So those differences and variations have to be worked out so that different support goes to different countries in order to leverage on the benefits of the reverse linkages. So there are critical parameters that may impact on what we achieve, and we have clearly demonstrated in the project implementation phases that for the entire period of the lockdown, when we were working on the Vodafone Africa project and working with the NOFIC project, never did we miss a single day, a single meeting, and we took decisions. I mean, resources were wired and colleagues were working remotely to date. And this is a demonstration that we can utilize the digital space to be able to have a sustainable working relationship under this principle of reverse linkage. I wish to say as a way forward that we need to build the capacity for data scientists and artificial, of course, intelligence to share resources. We know that with the pilot project of the Vodafone Africa, in order for us to be able to have continuity, we need to have a database of people who are going to be facilitated, who will take ownership, who will understand that they are operating within an internationalized and globalized world in which there are systems, there are frameworks, there are regulations. All this can actually be thrashed out if we set up excellent communication channels, very effective and efficient communication channels that will help us develop strategies on how we deal with each project as it comes. And definitely, I recommend strongly that we do a continuous benchmarking within this context of the Africa-Europe cooperation, so that we know now, we understand, for example, the last 2 years, some of the regulations, the legal frameworks that operate within the Dutch government. We do understand, we have learned some lessons, and I think by sharing, by having information and getting on different projects, we will be in a position to advance this Africa-Europe cooperation. I now take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, the Chief, and also our moderator, Professor Van Ryssen, to thank Honorable Chief Fortune Charumbira. And I also want to thank His Excellency, the Director General of the World Health Organization, who responded to our concern and of course, the able and very, very scientific, well-informed presentation by Dr. Fransen, our distinguished speakers who we are waiting to listen to, all the participants, our partners who I cannot list, who have made us to appear on the global stage and made the point that indeed it is possible, the African continent with its human capacity, we are able to drive an agenda that will not only improve Africa, but also partner with others, and we are able to work for the good of humanity. I thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think it was an in-depth presentation, and it's very much needed, because all of what we are discussing here is only realizable if we find new ways of working together. And I think that as Europeans, we are coming home to the thought that really Africa has, as you said it, has its own destiny. And so we need to come to terms with that fact. And so we need to find new ways in which we embrace that Africa has its own destiny, has its own objectives, has its own potential, is endowed in its own way, and how we make a win-win of that for everyone. And so thank you so much. The concept of reverse linkage is not a concept that I will forget after today. And I thank you so very, very much for that insightful presentation.